Welcome to the Let's Talk Energy podcast from EnergyNet. This series was recorded at the Africa Energy Forum 2024 in Barcelona, Spain. Join us for these and other episodes as we talk to the industry players, stakeholders, and rising stars of Africa's energy sector.
Ademola, good to see you here in Barcelona.
Thank you, John.
Representing Oando, a company that we've known over many decades. One of the major indigenous oil companies, moved into power, a big fleet of gas-fired power stations, and now here you are with clean energies. So what are the ambitions? How's the company shaping up? And then we can branch into a broader set of questions.
Thanks a lot, John. It's good to be here. Good seeing you again. Oando, we've always communicated to the world that we are indeed an integrated energy company. So our business is energy, not necessarily oil and gas. Oil and gas happen to be part of what we do, but energy is the focus. So for us, it's a question of, one, looking at the energy space, recognizing that energy is at the edge of chaos. We can already tell what sector is coming to dominate the energy space, displace fossil, and as we all know, that's the renewable energy space. When it will happen, that may be debatable, but whether it will happen or not is no longer for debate. So we recognize that if we're going to remain a relevant energy company into the next century, then we have got to embrace the renewable energy sector. Yes, it's budding at the moment. It's not as advanced as the fossil space, but we know that we must, start early, be part not only of the conversation, but of the solutions that are coming up on the continent, tailoring the energy transition in Africa to Africa's peculiar needs. That's on one hand. On the other hand, we cannot deny that climate change is a reality.
Sure.
We recognize this, and we understand that if nothing is done, the world will become chaotic. It's only a matter of time. And businesses don't thrive, when there is chaos. So again, we're looking at it from the point of climate change is not only a government issue to deal with. Climate change is for all of us to deal with. And as, a private sector player, we recognize the responsibility that we have to join hands with the government and the rest of the world to begin to design and develop climate-friendly solutions that are, however, bankable, because we're still a business.
Absolutely.
So the mandate of Oanda Clean Energy is to design and develop climate-friendly but bankable projects, not only in Nigeria, but across the African continent.
Okay. And in the sense, the word clean energy, what are we talking about here? Are we talking purely renewables? Are we talking about renewables plus gas hybrid projects using the transition fuel? How would you define clean energy in this sense?
For us, clean energy was, the word clean was actually chosen by our chairman, Mr. Jubril Adewale Tinubu. And the reason he went for the word clean was he said to us, if we're going to do renewable energy, then it must be renewable energy.
Okay.
Therefore, whatever projects that we get involved in must be clean.
Okay.
So we're talking about sustainable transport.
Yep.
And to us, sustainable transport does not include CNG-powered vehicles. If it's going to be gas, then it must be hydrogen. So sustainable transport for us, we defined into two different categories. It's electric vehicles for whether mass transportation or taxi hailing services or corporate use or even the promotion for private adoption that's electric vehicles for municipal transportation and building the infrastructure that is required to help that sector thrive. We have done this with ICE, that's internal combustion engines. We've built perhaps the largest downstream business in Nigeria.
Absolutely.
We've spun that off. And now what we're looking to do is build the next downstream business for e-mobility on the continent.
So we were talking before we started about Lagos, its extraordinary energy and implied its extraordinary challenges.
Yes.
So are you looking to deploy large fleets of buses? Are you looking for
Absolutely.
Motorbike couriers? This kind of stuff?
What we have done already, not looking to do, is to deploy 12-meter buses, all electric, for mass transportation in partnership with the Lagos State government through Lamata. We've run those buses over the last year now, testing the technology, testing the operational viability, the environmental acceptance, the commercial viability, and now we're increasing the fleet to 50 more buses, increasing the bus routes, and over the next 3 to 4 years, we're looking to deploy 2,000 of those buses across Lagos State alone. And we will do, by 2030, 12,000 of those buses across the country.
12,000
across Nigeria.
2,000 in Lagos
by
State.
2030. 2,000 in Lagos State by 2027, and 12,000 across the country by 2030. And we do not intend to import all of these buses. By 2026, the agenda is for Oanda Clean Energy to begin to assemble electric vehicles locally in Nigeria.
Oh.
Now,
Can I just ask?
yes,
Lagos State clearly is a good place to start, given famously actually on now President Tinubu's
Absolutely.
watch.
absolutely.
And under the finance minister now, the finances of the state were cleaned up, so it's able to do more. Is it actually rolling out across the nation? Will that be with private sector operators or still with state governments?
So it must be both, right? There must be private sector operators involved for operations excellence to be achieved. The government must also be involved, particularly when you look at the economics of deploying electric vehicles and the capital that's required to also deploy the infrastructure, not only the charging stations, but what powers the stations, right? And like I said, energy is our business. The agenda here is to invest in clean energy sources to power these charging stations so that this new subsector can thrive. Now, as you know, Lagos holds about 10 to 12% of Nigeria's population.
Yes.
And it's a 36-state country.
Yes.
So Lagos is the focal point for starting this project. And that was why we started in Lagos. Because if you're able to succeed in Lagos, then you can take lessons learned and then move across the country.
If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere.
Anywhere,
to,
essentially.
Channel our Frank
Yes,
Sinatra, yeah.
yes. And, so I was speaking to how we had defined, sustainable transport. So I've spoken to electric, right, for municipal transportation, but there's hydrogen powered, right, for long haul. Okay,
Yep.
so which then speaks to the next level of the rollouts that, the world will begin to see from Oanda Clean Energy in Nigeria and across the continent as we travel this challenging journey of transitioning energy from fossil-based sources to clean sources across the continent. And I say challenging for many reasons. The funding that is required, the capacity that is required, the policy across the continent, required to help, make this work. And, just ensuring that as we transition from fossil energy to clean energy, we don't transition Africa into poverty. We retain value on the continent. We build capacity on the continent so that at the end of the day, we can thrive. there is no, in my opinion, just energy transition if we cannot retain value on the continent.
Yep.
And that's the agenda that we're driving. And that's only, speaking to sustainable transport. We have projects in geothermal energy, using end-of-life oil wells to now generate steam, to power steam turbines for geothermal energy power. We've recently just signed an MOU with the NNPC RTI to co-research and develop a pilot project in this space. We have projects in PET bottle recycling. We're looking to recycle human fecal sludge, abattoir waste, biomass, on one hand for diesel, on the other through anaerobic digestion for compost and biogas. We're looking at projects in hydrogen. We're looking at building a 1.2 gigawatt solar module assembly plant in Lagos to meet not only local demand, but also for export purposes as well. We're looking at projects in wind. We are about to start a 12-month study to look at wind patterns and profiles across different states in Nigeria. We've signed MOUs to develop, in Cross River State, for example, we're developing 100 megawatt wind energy capacity in that state. In Edo State, we're developing 175 megawatts wind energy as well. So there are different verticals within the clean energy space that, we're investing time and money, just to ensure that we develop projects that are relevant not only to Nigeria, but, that can be modularized and rolled out across the continent of Africa.
Oando is, as we know, is a major corporation. How much of this huge program, can you do off your own equity and balance sheet, and how much you have to leverage debt to do this?
So all that we have done so far, specifically within the sustainable transport space, has been funded by Oando, the parent company, Oando Energy Resources. All the studies that we have done funded also by Oando. Even the wind energy study that I was just talking about, funded, by Oando. And what Oando is positioned to do is to provide equity where required, but we must do this with funding from other partners, whether it is debt or equity, so that we can achieve the right scale to make sure this works. Now, what we're trying to do is not to build, small businesses that are wholly owned by Oando, but to actually deliver at the scale that is required to make any meaningful impact. To do that, we recognize that debt will play a role, grants will play a role, equity from other partners will play a role, and where equity is required from the parent company Oando, that will be provided as well.
Very interesting. Just to go back a couple of stages, what is an extremely ambitious program. You mentioned the possibility when we were discussing the e-mobility with the buses of assembly or manufacture within Nigeria of those. So clearly that's one question. And then you mentioned the 1.2 gigawatts of solar, because clearly you've got to provide the power to do that. So how were those two projects conceptualized at the moment?
We're in the design phase, particularly for the solar module assembly plant right now. We're speaking to partners across the world, to serve, one, as funding partners, and two, as technical and operations partners as well. Powering, those that factory in particular, and also the PET bottle recycling factory, powering those two factories. It's clear we need to provide our own power using a hybridized solution. Thankfully, we know that natural gas is a transition fuel, so that will play a role. It will play a role also in how we power the charging stations in the preliminary stage, that is, as we then transition into using hydrogen, and then, of course, using solar, using wind where viable. So these are the elements that we're putting together to ensure that we have a 360 degrees clean energy operation even where we're manufacturing. But we're happy to start using gas, natural gas as we know it, right? Because today that's acceptable. But tomorrow we recognize the limitations that come with continued investments in gas. But
Yes.
should we invest today? Yes, we must invest today. You know,
Yes.
even, I mean, a separate conversation as a continent. Should Africa invest in gas exploration and production?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, we must. And we're gas rich, not only as a continent, but I mean, I'm sure you know that Nigeria, for example, is a, you know, highly gas rich, you know, country. And to pull the trigger on industrialization on the continent and also supply, you know, Europe to meet Europe's needs and North America as well, right? We must invest in gas exploration and production today.
Great. And among other projects, you have, as you say, wind is underway. You also have fuel cell projects and things, yes? Could you explain a little bit more about
Yeah, so on the fuel cell side, we've partnered with a company actually known as Fuel Cell.
Yeah,
LLC.
a very eponymous,
Yeah.
eponymous is the word, isn't it? Fuel cell,
Yeah, it's an American company, and we're looking to deploy a 5 megawatt facility in Lagos to power one of the free trade zones in Lagos. It's a mixed zone of residential, commercial, and industrial usage. And,
Which zone is that?
Alaro City.
Alaro City.
And we'll be deploying there because the agenda that the promoters of Alaro City, you know, have is to build a sustainable city. So they're very big on clean energy sources to power the entire zone.
Yeah.
So the partnership we have will not only sit within deploying a fuel cell solution, but this 5 megawatts is only a test. It will be scaled up once the concept is proven. We then move from there also to deploy solar panels using rooftop real estate in the zone, and also deploying, you know, other clean sources of energy to ensure that the zone runs on 100% clean energy. That's not the case today. It's still natural gas in use, but all of that will transition into clean energy sources. And there is a plan for it,
Yeah.
right? So there's clarity as to what the agenda is, and they're following through. We're only more than happy to be partners.
And interestingly, if you've got real estate developers developing this, that shows there's a hunger within the middle class or the more moneyed classes in Lagos
That's right.
to be in this kind of
That's right.
clean environment.
That's right.
It's most interesting. Perhaps a couple of last questions. I mean, you were talking about rolling out what you're learning and the products across Africa. Whereabouts are you looking in the initial phase, and how do you conceptualize growth beyond Nigeria's already substantial frontiers?
We're currently working in South Africa, looking to deploy electric vehicles for mass transportation there as well. We've got a partner in South Africa that we're working with. We've engaged the municipalities of Johannesburg and Cape Town. We're looking to test our first set of buses with a company called HG. It's a logistics company in South Africa, Cape Town specifically. They run a fleet of ICE vehicles, nearly about 150, but their growth phase, they have decided to do with electric vehicles. So we're partnering with them to test the first set of buses, and once comfort, you know, is achieved and, you know, they see that this is sustainable, then we increase the fleet. So that's going on in South Africa. We're looking tentatively into Kenya for wind energy projects. We're engaging some partners out of Togo, Ghana, you know, also to look at solar projects, wind energy projects. As you know, there is a huge deficit of energy on the African continent. We have about 1.3 billion people on the continent. 600 million of these people have no access to power. And I'm speaking to, this is nearly the population of Europe without access to power. So there's
Absolutely.
a huge market,
Yes.
for power provision. So the conversation in Africa today it's a blend of energy access, energy security, and energy transition. It's not just about transition. It's all of it in one.
Absolutely.
Right. So we recognize very early on that isolating Nigeria for the projects that we're doing is not the way to go.
No.
But yes, we can start with Nigeria, but we must very quickly spread across the continent.
Absolutely. In Nigeria itself, clearly it's a market with big issues. The Naira needing to stabilise and come back up. How difficult is it doing these projects in an environment where you have had currency instability?
No, it's a great point you bring, John. Finding funding is one issue. Everywhere you go, even here, I've heard today already how much money is available globally for clean energy projects. Some of them saying they're targeted, to Africa specifically. And then you begin to wonder, so why can't developers access these funds?
Absolutely.
Right. And where you find access opportunity as well, it comes in, foreign currencies like the USD or Europe, and there's volatility, like you said, foreign exchange volatility on the continent. What you're looking for is a localized currency type funding, because I'll give you an example. Africa is projected to spend north of $50 billion on solar PV infrastructure over the next 6 to 7 years.
Yes.
95% of that money will come in USD as a loan to Africa across the continent, different countries. And when the PVs are manufactured and deployed on the continent, they will be bought in local currency. The power they will generate will be paid for in local currency. And when you look at the question of foreign exchange volatility, you find that you stand a very high risk of making a loss even from the start.
Yes.
But if current trends continue, however, the loss is a double whammy. And what's that double? It's the fact that, again, about 85 to 90% of all of that money will find its way to China in exchange for solar modules and other components, because there's no manufacturing capacity on the continent.
Yes.
So I take dollarized loans and then I send the loans out to China in exchange for components that I will deploy on the continent and sell in local currencies. It's a huge challenge, but we're finding our ways around it. We're getting loans sometimes, dollarized loans, that we then refinance locally in Nigeria.
But you have got a Lagos banking market that has some debt.
There's some capacity to provide debt. So we're working with local banks to achieve this. But two things need to happen. One, there has to be more funds, dollarized or not, provided for these projects and made available, so that developers can actually access them and develop the kind of projects that have the right scope and quantum to deliver the kind of impacts we're looking for, if we're serious at all about achieving net zero by 2050. That's on one hand. There must be more local currency denominated debt made available as well. And the pricing of these loans need to be reviewed. Sometimes when you see how the loans are priced, you wonder, are we talking about the same kind of projects? These are low margin, projects, right? So that requires some level of rethink. Okay, and a whole lot more R&D and understanding is required for the African renewable energy market to grow. For example, if I go to a bank today, and I have gone to DFIs to say, I want to build a solar module assembly plant in Lagos. And they turn around and ask me, do you have offtake agreements?
Yes.
Look, a 1.2 gigawatt solar module assembly plant will do, if I do an average of 500 watts per panel, that's 2.4 million panels a year.
Yeah.
How many offtake agreements do you expect, and how many years do you want those offtake agreements to go into? However, if I turn around and I say to the same bank, I want to build a brewery, can I get a loan? They won't ask me for offtake agreements. Like, do you have people who, offtake the beer? They'll just basically look at the market and then make their judgment.
Yeah.
We need to approach renewable energy projects in the same light. The market is not as evolved as the beer market, yes, but that's because it's a nascent market and we need to develop it and give it time to grow. In the initial stages, it will not make absolute commercial sense like mature markets do, but we are committed to it, and we must recognize that if we don't invest in it, it will never grow.
Yes.
There are many reasons not to invest in manufacturing in Africa. Efficiency, capacity development, or human capital, expertise, funding, policies. There are reasons not to. But there is one main reason why we must. Because if we don't, we will transition not only energy, but the continent into poverty.
Absolutely.
Because value must be retained on the continent. We cannot continue to export lithium, nickel, cobalt, so that other countries can manufacture batteries and then sell back to Africa. We must mine those minerals on the continent and manufacture batteries on the continent, and do so across the entire renewable energy value chain if this transition is going to be just at all. That's the agenda Oanda Clean Energy is pushing, and we're committed to it.
It's a great note to end on. Is there anything else you'd like to mention?
Well, I mean, look,
that was a superb full stop.
Thank you. So there's not much to say than we must keep talking about it. We must amplify Africa's voice in the renewable energy agenda. We must amplify Africa's voice in the transition process. And we must recognize that Africa will curate its energy mix. Africa will curate its timelines, because Africa cannot be allowed to transition into poverty because of this new agenda.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, John.
That was a great conversation.
Thank you.
And very good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
This series was recorded at the Africa Energy Forum 2024 in Barcelona, Spain. Join us for these and other episodes as we talk to the industry players, stakeholders, and rising stars of Africa's energy sector.